Hey guys, welcome to Rosie's Dessert Spot. In this tutorial we'll be making a really fun Fortnite inspired 3-tiered cake. You'll need a 5-inch cake, 2 of these, and we want to cut them in half to create like a domed shape for the lid of our treasure chest. Stick the two together with a little bit of buttercream. This is chocolate buttercream that has ganache mixed into it. Stick it to a rectangle and then cut off the top just to make it straight for when we put on our second tier. Trim around the edges to make it rounded again, and then create a crumb coat all around this. I'll have the recipe for the ganache and also for the buttercream listed in the description box below this video. Once it's all covered, grab a scraper and go around and start smoothing down the sides. You could use a flexible piece of plastic to go over the top. I think works really nicely. This is just an acetate sheet that I usually use for kind of ganache work and rounded cakes. Into the fridge she goes for 20 minutes to set, and in the meantime we'll work on our wood panels. This is fondant that I've used and I've coloured it like a light brown. Roll it out to 3mm or so in thickness and take a little pointy tool. It could be the end of your paintbrush, it could be this fondant tool here, and just create waves and little knots that you would typically see in wood. Cut these down to size. I have a little ribbon that I've cut down so I know exactly how tall or how wide my cake will be. With a much larger or thicker scraper, I'm just indenting lines in the wood to act as the individual panels. Makes it a lot easier compared to having to cut down each panel and stick them on individually. This way you can just lift the whole thing and stick it straight to your cake. Make sure not to cut, you just want to emboss some nice thick grooves. Apply it to your cake with a little bit of water and then trim down the excess. I let my wood panels kind of stay on my bench top here for a good 10 minutes. That way the fondant had time to firm up and it made it a lot easier to apply onto my cake. Drape the top over and then create the metal bands that go around the treasure chest. This is just grey fondant that I've used. Applying it on with water and then cutting down the excess on either side. As a little finishing touch for the metal look, I've taken some more of that grey fondant and I'm using a regular, just kind of round piping tip to cut the little knots out. Stick these on with a little bit of water and try to space them out evenly as you go. I added 2 at the very top, but then I removed them because I remembered a cake needs to be sitting flat on there. Take a rectangle piece, use a ball tool to emboss like a lock shape. Taking my little pen tool here to emboss the bottom of the lock and then draw or mark in the outline of this just to make it a bit more obvious. Our second tier is complete. Into the fridge she goes, or if you're in a really warm climate, you can keep this in a cool room at room temperature. For the brickwork on our bottom tier, you can take an embossing tool, like I have, a little matte embossing tool. It's just made of silicone and I'm pressing it directly into the fondant. Try to line it up as best as you can and then cut down the individual panels. You could also use a ribbon to mark out just how tall it needs to be. In exactly the same way, we're going to pop this onto our 8-inch cake that's already been crumb coated and just applying it with a little bit of water, lining it up as best as we can after each panel. If you're enjoying these videos, you're welcome to join in on our classes. We are running lots of classes at the moment and the link for that will be listed in the description box below. I've taken a little bit of edible powder in orange and I'm just dusting it here and there to make it look like a more of a rustic brick effect or a distressed brick effect. Cut down some short wood panels and just layer them and emboss in their little holes for where the nails would go. So this tier was like the building block tier. So we have the wood and we have the brick. Cut your dowels flush with the top of the cake. I've used paper straws, but you could also use plastic bubble tea straws or wooden dowels. Stick on your treasure chest cake on top, and I've got a cardboard that's covered in aluminium foil that's going to work as our cake board for this. It is slightly raised, but not to worry, we can cover that up with our coins and edible treasures. I've used gumballs and some M&Ms for the decoration. For the piñata, I've taken 2 5-inch cakes cut in half and I'm stacking them all together. We'll have 4 layers of cake here in total. And then use a guide. I've just cut down some cardboard and marking some lines on the top and the side of my cake so I know where to cut to get that piñata shape. Cut off a little bit at a time as you go. It's a lot easier to take off more and almost impossible to add extra on top once it's been cut. Create the behind of your piñata, just sort of shaping down the back like so, and then the front as well. I was constantly glancing over at a picture of this piñata as I was doing this. I find that to be the most helpful way to do it when you're kind of sculpting a cake, is to have an image in front of you. Create a thick crumb coat all around, and it would be best to use a dark chocolate ganache based frosting for this. Even if it has a bit of buttercream mixed in, that's all good. The ganache is what makes it nice and firm and stable. Once it's completely covered, we have to smooth it out. Again, I've got that acetate sheet and I'm just going all around my cake until it's nice and smooth. It will be completely covered in fondant and ruffles, so I'm not too stressed about how neat this layer is. Pop it into the freezer in the meantime for about 10 minutes and then create our little board for that tier. I've created little holes for my straws to go in, and this is going to make sure that our top tier doesn't fall off. It's very susceptible to falling off because it's light, it's super tall, and it's right on top. Stick it on with a bit of buttercream. You will need dowels in your treasure chest, so let's not forget to add the dowels into our middle tier as well. And then gently feed through the cake. For the ruffles, you'll need a light purple, a dark purple, a light blue, a dark blue. Cut down panels and then give them little ridges, little indents, incisions at the base, and then stick them on with a bit of water. You want to plant the very first one really low on the cake so it hides the space between our top tier and our treasure chest. I created 2 rows for each color. Again, glance over at the photo if you need to, so you know how to arrange them. For his head, I decided to use fondant. This is just some fondant that I've colored with purple gel food color, and again, constantly glancing over at a photo and then cutting down the general shape of his face. The first time I tried this, it didn't work out because my fondant would not dry quick enough. So I went out, I bought some Tylose powder, and I kneaded a whole bunch of Tylose powder into this fondant. No one's gonna eat it, and that's why I wasn't too stressed about adding about like a teaspoon, no joke. But it just makes sure that your fondant A, doesn't lose shape, and B, it sets super fast for this project. Cut down the shape of his ears, and then I've added in some spaghetti to help plant them in there, and a bit of water to stick it all together. Emboss the space for his eyeball, and I've just taken some white fondant, stuck it in with some water, and some black fondant rolled into a ball and also stuck on with water. For the little symbol that goes on his back, I've taken some of that grey fondant, cut it into a square and outlined it with the brown. Create the arrow by just cutting down the general shape and stick it all together with water. For the little metal notches, you could use a blade or something sharp to indent the little details. You can let this sit for about 10 minutes on your countertop before applying it to the cake. For the rope around the head, this is just little bars of fondant stuck on with water. I recommend letting this sit overnight if you can, so it's nice and dry. Create a log, stick it in its mouth, and indent each individual tooth. Buttercream or ganache will not be enough to stick this to your cake, so you want to feed him through a straw and also add that extra layer of buttercream to stick it all together. Hide the seam with the last layer or two of that ruffle. And I'm also sticking on the symbol on the side of his body with a bit of water. And that is your Fortnite inspired cake complete. She is a lot of work, I'm not gonna lie, but I promise you it's totally worth it. And I'm one that's very anxious about sculpting cakes. They're like one of my kryptonites right next to square cakes, but I promise you if I could do it, you can too. Thank you for watching. Feel free to subscribe if you enjoy these videos, and we'll catch you again in the next one.